This week's Inside the Lords, I want to talk about rules, a little bit about double standards, and not necessarily about Matt Hancock, but I'll reflect on that. I've actually just come from doing Politics Live for the BBC TV, and it really struck me just how soulless the rules are. So this is what happens. I go in early and there's a makeup person there, and it's exciting. I can have makeup on. And she says, I'm here, but I'm not allowed to do your makeup. But you can help yourself if you want. And after decades of never being able to do makeup, that was no help. But there's something sterile about these rules that we're living under at the moment. And I just kept thinking, the masking, the fact that people were avoiding each other in the corridor, the whole atmosphere was the opposite of welcoming. And then we got in the studio and talked about rules, but I just want these rules to go. But I've also broken a few this week inadvertently in the House of Lords. So I wanted to talk about House of Lords rules, not about COVID. I was mortified after I did a speech on animal rights, or I was arguing against animal rights. I was arguing, in fact, for animal experimentation in the middle of the Environment Bill. And the Lord that followed me, a Lib Dem, made a rather pointed comment about how I had given a second reading speech rather than a report stage speech, or a committee stage speech, rather, and that I had made two general points and I'd got the bill wrong, and I was really embarrassed and thought, oh, I probably did, because when you're now at committee stage, you're meant to go through the bill and I was making some very grandiose comments about why I didn't think that humans were the same as animals, and that didn't mean being cruel to animals, of course, but why the importance of animal research should be maintained, because that is a series of amendments that we were discussing. I wasn't entirely off the ball, but I thought, I don't understand these different stages, and I was really embarrassed about it. And then I read Hansard the next day, and I realised that Jenny Jones, who had spoken before me, had actually stood up and made a speech which was basically about the importance of animal rights and how it was really good that these days we understood that animals actually had equal rights to humans, and that, in fact, in other words, she made as equally a philosophical speech. And so actually the criticism was really one of content, not of whether I broke the rules or not, but nonetheless. I then was again mortified when one of the doorkeepers pointed out to me that I'd walked out of the chamber when the speaker was speaking. And so when the speaker stands up, you're not meant to walk out. You're not meant to move. You're meant to stay still. I'd missed it. I missed the moment. I know that rule, but I kind of didn't. I just did the wrong thing. And I thought, oh, God, I keep getting these rules wrong. And I'm all a bit embarrassed about the whole thing and thinking I've got to learn what to do and how to do it and so on and so forth. But what you can understand is that there are rules in the House of Lords because they've been going for centuries, and they've got these rules, and I'm in there, I better learn them. There's a very funny story about rules, which is where you don't know, which I haven't told you, I think, which is I'm about to go in now for prayers, and I quite like going in for prayers. The bishops are in the House of Lords, so they say the prayers. It's a moment of reflection. And the first time I ever went to prayers, I was so keen that everybody thought I was praying and diligent that I kind of kept my head down because they read a psalm and I looked down, and then the next time I looked up everyone was facing me, because after the psalm is read you're meant to turn round, and I didn't know that, so it was the humiliation of the whole thing. But afterwards I discovered that the reason why you have to turn round is because in ye olden days you couldn't kneel if you were in the Lords because you had a sword. So you'd have done yourself a damage. So you turn around and put your knee on the bench. So I now diligently turn around and put my knee on the bench. And I saw somebody who was newly brought into the Lords recently make the same mistake as me, and I went and tapped them on the shoulders. I thought that was the nice thing to do. In other words, there are rules. But what is obviously extraordinary is that we live in a society now where those rules have become, part of our everyday life. We're all trying to negotiate ourselves around rules, and I really want to urge anyone who's listening that, from the 19th of July, if you're not already doing it, that we want to be bold and get rid of social distancing, get rid of the masks, and actually stop following rules, but start listening to our judgment and our common sense. It doesn't mean that we're all going to be letting anything rip or misbehaving, but there's a kind of hypocrisy, just like I was mad about the Jenny Jones point, and there was something else, which was I overspoke on my question. I spoke for 52 seconds and you're only meant to speak for 30 to 40 seconds, and I got sort of shouted at, and I was kind of embarrassed because I broke the rules. But then I discovered, because one of my diligent friends timed it, that the person who spoke before me spoke for 54 seconds and the person who spoke after for 50 seconds. So sometimes the rules are a way of making a political point. The reason I'm saying that is because Matt Hancock has now gone for breaking the rules that he imposed on us, and people were calling for his resignation. But as my colleague Ella Whelan pointed out on LBC, it's sort of annoying that the reason why we saw the demise of Matt Hancock was because of his breaking of the rules. And I do understand the them and us, that there's special rules for UEFA, and that somehow the disease doesn't affect top business people who don't have to socially isolate. And we all feel that sense of indignation about hypocrisy. And yet I actually want people to be held to account for what they do, what they say. And Matt Hancock should have been held to account for his illiberalism, some of the ways that he's behaved during the pandemic as the health minister. And there's something about him being got for having an affair that doesn't sit easy with me. I don't want that to be the basis on which we hold our politician to account. I want content to count. So in a sort of a way, I want people to take up the points I was making in my animals experimentation speech, not to go on about whether it was the right kind of speech for the section of the legislation, because that seems to me to be more important. Just, I suppose, finally, we are going into that phase now where the rules should be done away with. And as you will know, because I moaned last time we spoke, the event that we had organised as the Academy of Ideas on the 17th of July has been scuppered by these rules and by the regulations and this unnecessary, overcautious approach to a virus which at this stage is more endemic than pandemic. And we all know that the risks are now minimal, but we're not irresponsible in how we approach that. But we have now got our Open for Debate Battle of Ideas session on the 31st of July at Church House. It's a much scaled down programme, but with our partners, the University of Buckingham and Skills World, we're going to the Church House with 4 brilliant panel debates on discussions on everything from the Sewell Race Report and it's why it was met with such absolute contempt and disdain by the traditional or by the new anti-racist movement, but actually raised some very important issues about how you actually have debate and discussion and argument in a period of conformity. What we do about free speech on campus, a very important issue that doesn't just affect students, and also whether the move from 50% going to university to a government focus on the 50% who don't go to university and the whole skills agenda is going to be part of the levelling up discussion. And I hope that you will come along. And we will absolutely embrace the freedoms of you not following rules. What we are about is the quality of discussion. And in order for the quality of discussion to work, even though we've got some excellent speakers, it requires an audience that actually participates and joins in the discussion and turns these into public conversations. So I'd like you to join us for a rule-free, open for debate, Battle of Ideas session. I will be chairing some of the debates, and when I say rule-free, it's not chaos. Because the one thing that I think we've maybe learned is that we all obviously have to follow proportionate, sensible ways of running a society. That's fine. But what we've been through in the last 15 to 16 months has been a disproportionate, over-the-top policing of the minutiae of the way we relate with each other. And in order to get out of that and to get the confidence back to live normally amongst each other, we have to learn to reconstitute public life. And that's what the Academy of Ideas is going to do on the 31st of July. And I really hope that you'll join us. I'm now going to go inside the Lords. I'm going to confine the remarks I make on a question to 30 to 40 seconds and not go over time because I'm good like that. And it's about children and bubbles. And I'm going to ask the question about how on earth in the future we are ever going to tell pupils or kids that school is important when it's due to stupid bubble isolation rules that nearly 500,000 children are sent home when they're well. How we're ever going to say to kids, the most important thing you've got to do is knuckle down and get on with your schoolwork, when we've just shown them we didn't really care about schools after all. So I'm going to go in and argue that schools should be open without bubbles, without any isolation, and that pupils should follow the traditional rules of a school, but not the newly imposed mad rules. And that's a lesson for all of us.